Hello, welcome to Story Sessions with Mr. Ling. In today's session, I will be reading a book titled The Life of Stephen Hawking. The Life of Stephen Hawking. Illustrations by Isabel Munoz, written by Jane Kent, and designed by Nick Ackland. My name is Stephen Hawking, and I am a world-famous scientist and author. I am known not only for my work on black holes and relativity, but because I beat the odds and lived with a form of motor neuron disease for years longer than doctors predicted. Let me tell you my life story and show you how I didn't let disability stop me from following my dreams. I was born in Oxford on 8th of January 1942. I always loved that this date was also the 300th anniversary of the death of Italian astronomer and mathematician Galileo Galilei. My parents were Frank and Isabel Hawking, and I was their first child. They went on to have two girls, Mary and Philippa, and when I was 14 years old, they adopted another child, Edward. People described our family as eccentric and thinkers. We often ate in silence while reading books. We kept bees in our basement, and our family car was a converted London taxi. My father was a researcher in the area of tropical medicine. He wanted me to follow in his footsteps and also go into medicine, but I preferred mathematics. I went to St. Albans School at the age of 11, and although I was bright, activities outside the classroom held my attention more than my lessons did. I had a few close friends, and we loved playing board games together, as well as making up our own. Once, we even built our own computer from recycled parts and used it to solve math problems. But my favorite pastime was lying on the grass in our garden with my mother and siblings, gazing up at the stars in the night sky. I started at University College, Oxford in 1959 at the age of 17. It was the same college that my father had attended. Math was not an available course there, so I studied physics instead, with a particular focus on cosmology. As with school, I didn't put a lot of effort into my university studies. Thankfully, I was intelligent enough to get away with not doing much work, and at the end of 3 years, I earned a first-class honors degree in natural science. In 1962, I went on to study for a PhD in cosmology at Trinity Hall, Cambridge University. It was during my first year there, shortly after my 21st birthday in 1963, that I was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS, which is a form of motor neuron disease. It meant that the nerves controlling my muscles were shutting down. I had begun to have health problems while I was at Oxford. Sometimes I would trip over and my speech would be slurred. I tried to hide my symptoms, but eventually my father noticed and took me to see a doctor. Tests revealed I was in the early stages of ALS, and doctors said I might only live for another 2.5 years. But I was determined to fight it. Just before my diagnosis, I had met a young lady called Jane Wilde at a New Year's party. She was studying languages at Westfield College, University of London. We quickly fell in love, and she stood by me when I told her that I had ALS. We got engaged in 1964 and were married a year later. We went on to have 3 children. Robert was born in 1967, Lucy in 1970, and finally, Timothy in 1979. Prior to my disease, I hadn't really put much effort into my studies, but knowing that I might not have long to live gave me the push I needed to focus on my work and finish my PhD. In 1966, I finally handed in my doctoral thesis entitled Properties of Expanding Universes. I went on to become a member of the Institute of Astronomy in Cambridge in 1968. I was forced to start using a wheelchair the following year as the ALS took hold. Within a couple of years, I began to need assistance with many tasks, and my speech was getting so slurred that people had difficulty understanding me. I was fascinated by the work of Roger Penrose, a cosmologist whose findings on the fate of stars and the creation of black holes were groundbreaking. In 1974, I was able to show that black holes, which are made when stars collapse, don't swallow matter completely as previously thought. In fact, some radiation can escape the gravitational force. My theory made me something of a celebrity in the world of science, and I became a Fellow of the Royal Society that same year, at the age of 32. Penrose and I then began to work together to expand on our ideas and learn more about the creation of the universe. In 1985, I caught pneumonia and had to have a tracheotomy, which meant I permanently lost my voice. I was worried that I would no longer be able to work, but a computer programmer from California called Walther stepped in. He had developed the Equalizer, a speaking program whereby I could select words on a computer screen with a handheld clicker, which then passed through a speech synthesizer. Eventually, I was unable to use my hands, but thankfully, the program could also be used through head or eye movement. So I switched to directing it via a cheek muscle that was attached to a sensor. The computer program allowed me to continue to write. I worked on many scientific papers and also on several books that I hoped would bring my ideas to a wider audience. In 1988, A Brief History of Time was published, giving an overview of space and time, as well as reviewing the theories of great thinkers such as Newton and Einstein. It proved extremely popular, selling millions of copies worldwide, being translated into more than 40 languages and spending more than 4 years on the top of London Sunday Times bestseller list. In 1991, the Oscar-winning filmmaker Errol Morris created a documentary about my life. The title was A Brief History of Time, the same as my book. I went on to appear in many popular TV shows, including The Big Bang Theory and The Simpsons. This allowed me to reach a wider, often younger audience and show off my wicked sense of humor too. I became known as the rock star scientist. I visited Kennedy Space Center, Florida in 2007. And while there, I was able to experience zero gravity. I boarded a modified Boeing 727 and flew for 2 hours over the Atlantic Ocean. When I was released from my wheelchair, I was completely weightless. Newspapers around the world printed photos of me floating in the air. I appeared at a conference in Sweden in 2015 to discuss new theories around black holes. I talked about the issue known as the information paradox, of what becomes of an object when it enters a black hole, and proposed a new idea. It was thought that information about an object disappeared forever once it crossed the outer boundary or event horizon of a black hole. I suggested instead that the information about the object is stored within a surrounding halo. I noted that black holes are not eternal prisons, and perhaps the stored information could be released one day. In late 2017, Cambridge University posted my doctoral thesis on its website. It was incredibly popular, so much so that the overwhelming demand crashed the university server. By the end of the first day, it had been viewed over 60,000 times. In my thesis, I aimed to show that the Big Bang theory, in which the universe began from a single point, was possible. Although it is now an accepted scientific fact, when I wrote my thesis back in 1966, scientists were still arguing over the idea. At the age of 76, I passed away on 14th of March 2018 at my home in Cambridge. I had finally succumbed to ALS, having lived with the disease for over 50 years longer than expected. That same month, it was announced that my ashes would be placed in London's Westminster Abbey. I would rest alongside other scientific greats, such as Sir Isaac Newton and Charles Darwin. I am thought of as the brightest star in science, and my legacy will always live on. I hope that my spirit, determination, and many triumphs in the face of adversity will be an inspiration to others who come up against their own trials. Life is a precious gift, so make the most of your time and never let anything dull your shine. No matter what setbacks you encounter, there is always a way to achieve your dreams. You just have to get out there and find it. The end. Thank you for staying with me until the end of the video. If you wish for more stories like this, remember to like and share the video and subscribe to this channel. See you again. Bye-bye.